Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I hereby call to order the April 20th hearing of the City of Prescott's Board of Adjustment. This is an open public hearing. This hearing is being recorded and televised by the City of Prescott and, in some instances, by representatives of the public media. This public hearing may be rebroadcast on local cable television and or other radio stations. The number of board members present today are 5. We would require 3 for a majority vote. During the hearing, an effort will be made to give all interested parties an opportunity to be heard. All parties wishing to be heard on an issue are required to raise their hand and be recognized by the chair prior to speaking. Speakers will be expected to state their name and address for the record so that we may know who is speaking and will be able to contact them at a later date if necessary. The board members present this morning, from my far right, Tony Teeters, and we have 2 new board members I'm going to recognize this morning. One is Bryn Stotler, and one is Patty Brandon. And we have Johnny Braden, sorry. Patty Braden. And Johnny Forker to my right, and my name is James DiRienzo. I'm the chairman. To my far left is our competent recording secretary, Darla Eastman. And I'm going to highlight that competent because she is. In the audience this morning, we have George Worley, who is a planning manager, John Palladino representing the city. He's the city council, the city attorney. And we have Greg Lizelle, who's our councilman with the shades. Now, there's an individual I always see in the back. I think you're with planning and zoning, are you not?
George Sheets.
George Sheets from planning and zoning. I see him back there, but I never recognize him. But today I'm going to recognize him. And in the future, I'm going to recognize you also. Well, no, that's because you wear glasses, Greg. You got to take your glasses off. The first item on the agenda this morning is variance 17-001, and George Worley will give us the presentation.
We didn't approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a request for variance associated with what are called flagpole lots, proposed to be created on the property that's highlighted with the red boundaries. There are 6 total parcels associated with this. One of them is an abandoned right-of-way of a street. That abandoned right-of-way is going to be part of the flagpole portions of the lot that I'll show you in just a moment. Our land development, and I apologize, if you can't hear me, let me know. I'm fighting a cold and this is affecting my voice. If the Land Development Code has certain requirements that were put into place originally back in 2003 to address flagpole lots to assure that the fire department had access to those lots. One of the requirements is that the length of the flagpole portion of the lot, and I'm going to show you what I mean by flagpole. If you could imagine, this is the flag. The portion of the lot that connects to the street is the flagpole. The intent of the Land Development Code was to provide for not more than 150 feet in depth, because that's approximately how far the fire department can pull a hose from a point and then deal with a fire on the site. There are situations that allow for greater lengths, but those require a variance through this body in order to obtain them. The proposal is to reorganize, not create new, reorganize the lots shown with the red outlines here through what's called a lot line adjustment, and that's something that's provided for in state law and the city's subdivision code, into this arrangement that will have 4 residential lots, 3 of which are accessed via long flagpole portions that extend out to Robin Drive. One of the request by the applicant to do this is to avoid having a significant main line extension that would come in and address these lots. These can be connected via this route with yard lines, the less expensive, installed by a plumber. You don't need a utility contractor. The main lot has access and frontage through a street stub from the adjoining neighborhood to the east. So give you an orientation, up is north. See if I can zoom this out just a little bit. So the access will come in this way, and typically with this type of access, we would require that they have a joint access easement that covers all of these so that there's a single driveway coming in. The individual pieces of the flagpole portions of the lot are not wide enough to accommodate a fire truck width driveway. We require about 20 feet for that. So typically with this type of situation, we will require at the time they do this that they put an easement over this to allow for all of the properties to use a single driveway access. They will own a piece of property that extends to the main public street, but they will use a driveway that lies within an easement that crosses back and forth over those lines. The same would be the case for utility access to the site. Water and sewer lines to the individual lots will be within easements down to the point where they can connect into the main system. It's a little unusual to have flagpole portions this long. Requests for variances for the length of the flagpole is not uncommon. Generally, they're still closer to 150 feet than we have this situation. So this is a bit of a unusual request on that part. So staff has reviewed this. We've sent it through excuse me, we've sent it through reviews by all of our department staffs, fire department, building department, engineering. Excuse me. What they propose to do can be accomplished meeting all city codes provided a variance is granted to the flagpole length. There is sufficient water pressure, sewer lines, all of those things have been identified. So this is practically potential. It's not something, again, that we normally see given the circumstances. We had one letter submitted by an adjacent property owner last week that was included in your packet, but this morning we had a packet of 16 additional letters that were handed to us. So I apologize, you don't have them, and I don't have sufficient copies to give each of you one. I can pass these around if you want to look through them. They're a bit of a form letter approach signed by 16 different property owners.
Okay, George, thank you.
It may be beneficial at this point to allow the applicant to speak to you, and staff will be available to answer any questions you have from a technical standpoint. And again, all of our hearings at this body are public hearings, so the public will be welcome to speak after the applicant and after the board.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, George, but I'd like to spend at least a few minutes before that to allow the board to take a look at some of the issues so they can address that to the applicant. Is that
Very
right?
good.
So we can spend 2 or 3 minutes on that, or maybe more. I think that this is an SF-35 lot, so there's more items that can be more activity on that SF-35 than a basic SF-9. So I think that's the issue on the first letter anyway that we got, because they're saying that there's RVs but that's activity that's approved if you take a look at the current code. So
Right. There are codes that control certain types of activities.
Yeah.
If it's disruptive activities,
Yeah.
our police department can be involved in enforcement of those
It
things.
does say that in the code, that you do it within reason, a reasonable way to use your property. But it is an SF-35. It makes a big difference.
Yes, sir.
And so. Tony, are they all the same? They're just signing one? Okay, can the applicant, if the applicant would like to address this particular request, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Bobby Raber. My address is 400 Lorraine Drive in the city of Prescott, 86305. Something that probably hasn't been mentioned is that crossing all this property is all the city water lines for the whole city of Prescott. And one of the issues that we've had clear back since we bought the property in '07 is that those water lines weren't under easement. And it was a multiple year issue that we dealt with this city. And up till most recently, being a couple weeks ago, we finally got some things tied up that weren't finished with easements. The city still didn't have easements. But what you see here is the result of multiple PAC meetings, lots of surveys with Lion Engineering and with all the departments in the city, because the potential impact of those water lines wants to be minimized. The impact of those water lines and the potential of multiple lots touching them, all those things. So what you see here, right under the driveways for the most northern two lots, and the setback easement for the building, right there, yeah, that's where all the city water lines run. So it's a group effort that we've had with all the departments to figure out how do we minimally impact the potential access and say the lines need to be serviced. How do we minimally impact without ending up with this 10-acre lot turning into the same thing that you see on the right, all those little quarter-acre lots that Sandretto Hills neighborhood. That would not be a good thing to do with, the more lots that touch the pipes, the bigger problem we have. And so what we see here is kind of like a summary of the minimum impact we can have on those lots while the city pipes remain underneath all the setbacks and driveways that a homeowner couldn't build on anyway. So there's no reason why a future homeowner could have any potential complaint about a water line, nor could the city have any difficulty accessing the water lines should they need to service them. Or sometimes they come out and they test them because they think there's going to be there's a leak downstream or something, so they hydraulically bore down to the pipes and do some harmonic testing and stuff. And the potential to do that is all there for the city without impacting lots of lots. I have gotten feedback from one specific neighbor in the neighborhood most recently because APS came to trim the trees along the power lines that run between my property and Sandretto Hills neighborhood. Right on that fence line there's power lines. So they use our property to access the trees in the backs of all those yards, which is fine. They came and they said, hey, there's a couple trees in the back corner of your lot, elm trees that are very big. Elm trees have branches that die all the time. They recommended that I trim those dead branches out, just clean up the old trees, which since we've acquired the property and moved in 2 years ago, we've owned it since '07, but because of the water line issues, we haven't been able to live there. So we've only moved in 2 years ago, but most recently, per APS request to clean those trees out, I'm out there cleaning out the trees with a pole saw and everything else to get rid of the dead branches to decrease the fire hazard, and my neighbor's yelling over the fence that I'm an idiot cutting trees down. I mean, in the last 2 months, I've hauled off 2 40-yard dumpsters, multiple loads to the dump. Every week I fill my dumpster just cleaning up this old ranch property. It's an amazing property, but it's got, ranch stuff piled up everywhere since the 40s. So I'm doing my best to clean up the property, get rid of the fire hazard, do everything I can to make it nice. And apparently there's a neighbor that doesn't like it when I do that. So and that's the one that's most likely submitted a letter. I've never received this letter that you guys have, but I guess they don't like the fact that I'm cleaning it up. But what you see here is the final result of, like I said, multiple meetings with the city, with every department, trying to work out a way that minimally impacts the future of those city water lines. And as a result, my wife and I did execute the final easements that would solidify easement coverage for all the city water lines for the city of Prescott over that property even just a couple weeks ago. Because we want to be good citizens, we want to protect those water lines and the water lines for the city. So are there any questions?
Any questions from the board? Is there anyone in the audience? Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address this particular issue? Anyone? Okay, I have a couple of questions for George. So, George, the first, I consider this to be 4 legs of this particular plot, 4 legs. The
Correct.
first leg is a 50-foot wide, goes to a 36-foot wide, 36 and then 20. That's how the width of the roadway, regardless whether there are 3 poles or 2 poles or 1 pole, the fact is it's 50, 36, 36, and 20. And you're saying that there's going to be an easement, there's going to be one access for all 3 properties using that one access road without having to have 3 separate poles?
I believe we're going to insist on that primarily for fire access into the site. We will need at least a 20-foot wide fire lane provided that meets our requirements for fire lanes that will get back to and allow us access all the way through to the last northernmost lot.
Because the last northernmost lot is in compliance, it has a 20-foot wide road, but it's there, but then you have a 50-foot with 3 16-plus feet, and those require variances. I would prefer not to see 6 or 8 variances per flag. I think that George is correct, where a common access to all lots using one roadway, which takes care of my issues on the emergency vehicles, because they need that 20 to 24 feet. 16 is not good enough for them. Is that right, George?
What we're looking at are 2 different parts of our process. One is there's a minimum legal requirement to front the city's utility mains in order to connect to those mains. And to do that, flag lots allow for a smaller extension than the full width of a lot to connect to that main. It's a frontage requirement in the code. Practical access is a different requirement, and practical access for flag lots often involves a common access easement or joint access easement that allows more than one property owner to use it, and very often also has a single driveway that is shared, covered by that easement. In this particular case, the reason why there are 3 flagpole portions down here is to provide that legal frontage on the main to allow a connection to the utility mains. It's not intended, nor will we allow individual driveways on each of those lots. They will not be sufficient width to allow for access by our fire apparatus. So they will have to have an easement, and our fire department will require that at the time that this goes through the review for the lot line adjustment, which is substantially the same as a subdivision plan.
Yeah, okay. That answers my question. Any other questions from the board? For George, for staff, or for the applicant? The applicant had another comment to make? Please.
Do you want me to state my name and address?
No, you're all set.
Okay. So just along the lines of the 3 driveways all the way down to 1, this was worked out with the fire department in what would be their best interest to provide the biggest possible access to get back to that lot, remaining with the last 20-foot wide access. And also, because of where the water lines are at, the city, it's the water department, those departments, everybody wants to minimize the number of utilities that cross those water lines. The less ditches, the less everything is better for the city. Their proposal was actually that those 3 lots, which one of them already has a well on it, that the northern 2 lots don't, that rather than cross and trench and potentially add another utility over those water lines, that those 2 lots, or that all 3 lots, just use a well and a septic rather than attaching to the city water lines to minimize the potential impact of cutting trenches over the top of all those city utilities. And so, that we'll do it however the city wants to do it, but that is what the request was from the water department, was to not impact those water lines as much as possible, nor do they want anybody tapping into the water lines because they're running at 250 PSI. Our house is on a regulator. The regulator goes out every couple of years. It's a big problem to be hooked to those city water mains by yourself. So they actually requested that we don't attach those 3 lots. And one of them, like I said, already has a well, that those homeowners be required to do a well and septic and just minimize all impact with the potential water lines. So, just so you know.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I have one more question, George. If this variance is approved, we will have one common access to those 3 properties. Is that the summary of what we're looking at?
Yes, I think what I told you and what the applicant told you are effectively the same thing.
Yeah.
common access. The fire department's minimum width is 20, which is
Yeah.
why that last leg for the northernmost lot is 20 feet wide, to allow that driveway access.
Okay, so if I have no other comments from the board or from the public, I call for the vote.
Move to approve variance B17001 to permit the length of the driveway to exceed 150 feet in length and to have widths of 16.7 feet.
Second.
Okay, so we have a, and it's the variance V17-001. Is that what we're looking at?
That's
George?
correct, sir. And I'm not sure if you opened it up to the public or not. Did you
We did.
request it? Okay.
We
very
did,
good.
we asked the
Thank you.
public for any input.
I apologize, I missed that.
And there was none. So now we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion on the board members? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. The motion is passed. Variance is passed. Good luck. Thank you very much. Before we move on, I'd like to approve the minutes of the last meeting we had. Do I hear any revisions, adjustments, or changes to the minutes of the last meeting? If not, can someone make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes from the February 16th, 2017 meeting.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
We have a original motion and a second. Any other further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Minutes have passed. Where did my thing go? Okay, we have another variance in front of us this morning, variance 17-002. George?
Mr. Chairman, may I interject?
Oh, yes, you may.
Just wanted to, in the interest of full disclosure, I am acquainted with Mrs. Brunswig, one of the applicants of this variance, and as such, I'll be recusing myself from the proceedings and stepping out.
Thank you very much, and we will call you back in after the vote's taken.
Thank you.
Now, that forces us to have only 4 members, which means we need 3 members for a majority vote. That's normally how it works. We had it approved a couple of meetings ago, so we're down to 3. Okay, George, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for a rear yard variance on a piece of property. The request is associated with the intent to install a freestanding patio cover on the rear of the property. This subdivision is a planned area development. It has reduced rear yard requirements for setbacks already, and we'll show you those in just a moment. The site in question is highlighted on the map. The property to the west of that site is significantly lower down the hill. There's approximately 6 to 8 feet of vertical distance to the property behind this lot where that green area is shown on the aerial photo. The house in question is built to meet the required setbacks that were adopted at the time the subdivision went into effect. Part of that is a reduced rear yard. It's less than the 20 feet that's a typical rear yard for most of our zoning district. In this particular case, because the patio cover is to be attached to the house, it's considered subject to the rear yard setback requirement. And in this case, he has some significant issues trying to detach it based on the engineering of the building. He's got an exposed area that's facing to the west. That's where our primary winds come from. There needs to be some design criteria associated with it. So his original design was to attach it to the house, which accounts for his requirements. But the issue in question then comes in with this rear yard setback that is shown in that lighter line right there. So his building, his proposed patio cover will encroach over that. This area is open to the outdoors, but it's under the roof of the house. So this sort of extends that outdoor area under roof a little further out with this attachment. The city's codes allow for a reduced rear yard setback if it is a freestanding, self-supporting building, an accessory building. It would allow it to be as close as 5 feet to the rear property line. In this case, however, because it's attached to the primary structure, our codes say that it is part of the primary structure and is subject to the setbacks of the primary structure. He cannot attach it to the building and comply with the setback requirements for this zoning district at the same time. This variance is sort of, good way to describe it is a bit of a technicality. If the structure were not attached to the building, it could be placed in exactly the same spot that he's showing here if it were freestanding, self-supporting, exactly where he's showing here. But by attaching it, through a technicality, it is a part of the main building. So staff has no objections from our side regarding this requested variance, because literally a 1-inch gap between this structure and his main house would let us approve it at our level without coming through this variance process. But the attachment is a key part of the language in our code, so it's not something that we can waive or address through an administrative process. It needs action by this body.
So the, excuse me, the appearance, either way, whether it's at 1 inch or not, the appearance is going to be exactly the same.
That's correct. We believe it would be substantially the same design and
So
substantially
same
the same
design, the
location.
same appearance, except for that one, not connected and connected.
Correct.
Okay.
In some cases, that not connected and connected is significant. In this neighborhood, as you can see from the aerial photo, with the reduced setbacks, these are relatively small lots with relatively large houses on them. The houses take up much more of the site than in most other of our neighborhoods where you have larger setback requirements. So we don't believe there's going to be a significant impact on the design and development and adjacent property owners based on approval of this variance, should you choose to do that.
Thank you very much. Any questions for?
We do have the applicant here if you have questions.
Yeah. Any questions for staff before we have the applicant come up? Is the applicant here?
What's the property, that vacant property right behind?
It's actually common area belongs to the HOA. It's common area.
Any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here today? Please, sir. Come up and state your name and address for us.
Ronald Brunswick, 1602 Cloudstone Drive, Prescott, Arizona, 86301. Mr. Chairman, board members, good morning.
Morning.
I appreciate this opportunity to inform you about our circumstance. We're retired. We chose Prescott as our home. We've been here now 3.5 years. The first thing and I also want to thank the planning department, because we worked to see if there were other options to do than this. We do get we're up on the very top of the hill. The reason we bought the home, we have a casita, which is good for guests, and this is the first time we've had people come back and visit us within a year from when we moved someplace. So they all love Prescott. We love it, and we love showing our friends of the town. When we bought the house, our back, that niche there looks a little deeper than it really is. It's about 8 feet by 14 feet there, and it's got a beam up there, so the sun, and it faces, when we bought the house, there's a window on this side and 3 in the little curve, a big one in the center part, a big one over there, and 3 little ones on that, and the center part is our living room, dining, and our master bedroom. All of those windows were down, shades were down, and we have a panoramic view from the P to Granite Mountain. So we're looking right at Thumb Butte, and it's a beautiful view, and we love seeing it, but during the afternoon we have to put all the curtains up because the sun is so severe where it's coming in right at that angle. So I looked at, after we lived there about a year, I looked at putting a retractable awning up, but after the first year, we had such severe, we get a lot of wind up on the top of that hill. And I was concerned that it would be out and not get put back, and it would tear off and damage the house. So I went to visit my son, and he had this exact same canopy at his home, and it was very attractive and comfortable. It's an insulated panel, aluminum, wood-grained aluminum beams, and And so I said, this is perfect, so I got a hold of the manufacturer. In December, I went into the Homeowners Association. They've approved this. I submitted plans to the city and met with George and them, and fire department, building, and everybody has approved it, but the setback was the issue. And then George informed me that I could build it freestanding. So I was thinking that may be an option if I could get 2 columns, because the little windows on the corners are small windows. They're probably 16 inches wide with a little space in between it, and then you got the big windows. So I said, well, if I could get 2 columns, that's only going to possibly block the window. But with the design on this, I have to have 3 columns on the outside when I attach it to the house. So I submitted it back to the engineer, and he said I have to put 3 more columns in, 1 on each end and 1 in the center of that space, which destroys the architect. With 3 columns, it destroys the function and aesthetics of the whole thing. It just makes it where an architect wouldn't do it.
So I think you're saying you would have a column right there,
You'd have a column right there,
right in
yes.
the middle of your...
Yeah. And so that's when I made the decision that I needed to do a variance and attach to the house, because I can build it where it is, but I can't attach it. And the other one would just, I wouldn't be able to live with it, I don't think. So that's why I submitted for the variance, and I appreciate your consideration for it. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience would like to address this issue? George?
Yeah, George Cheeson, Planning and Zoning and Unified Development Code. This is a big surprise to me. One of the reasons why I came today was it didn't make any sense that this was a variance issue anyway. At Prescott Lakes, we probably have 50 of these. We've got maybe 200 detached units that have small pillars into the ground and things. And in the case of roofs, those are not counted as part of the setback. Everything goes from the main foundation of the main structure. And so I think this is one area that under UDC it should be treated more like an extension of a roof and not require any variance. It's kind of slicing words when you go between. You could have the unit detached with an inch between there with the same, and to be the same structures and the columns and everything out there. So I recommend that this be approved, and we maybe bring that forward to the UDC at some point to make it consistent with the rooftop thing.
Yeah, I think you're right, George. I mean, if I were an owner and just moved it by 1 inch, the appearance is exactly the same, and at the end of the day, it's like, why would we do that? So maybe we have to address the code, George, and take a look at that again. Okay, so any other comments from the general public? Hearing none. Any other comments from the board? I call for a vote.
Move to approve B17002 to reduce the rear yard setback to 5 feet to allow the attachment of a patio cover to the rear of the house.
Second.
We have a first and second. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
The motion is passed. Thank you very much. Are there any other issues for the good of the order from the board or from the general public or from George or from Greg and other than those glasses?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
I like the leg.
I actually do when Brian comes in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim.
I like the legs personally.
I just come from work. I work. I work.
For a living?
So, Greg, please, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank the 2 new board members, and I haven't had a chance to thank Tony formally for stepping up and helping us out. You guys are an extension of the council, and we can't do it all, and we need people that care about the community and do what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So hearing no more comments or for the good of the order, meeting's adjourned.